Hello, I'm Benjamin Limmer, Bureau Chief for Public Transportation at the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and I'd like to welcome you to Along the Lines, a podcast series where we'll share exciting news and updates and explore current issues and ideas on Connecticut's public transportation system. The Connecticut Department of Transportation recently released a bold vision for the future of mobility throughout the capital region. This is called the Greater Hartford Mobility Study, with the goal of reimagining and reconnecting neighborhoods in the Greater Hartford area. The initiative began in 2020 as a community-driven vision for creating a more vibrant, equitable, and sustainable region. The goal is to improve the movement of not only people, but goods as well, provide more options for residents, improve accessibility and reliability of public transportation, as well as accommodate future needs and emerging advances in technology, all while minimizing environmental impacts of the new transportation network. So today, we are honored to welcome as our guest from the Connecticut DOT, Kim Lesay, who's my counterpart, Bureau Chief of Policy and Planning, as well as Kevin Burnham, Transportation Supervising Engineer, to discuss this bold vision to reimagine travel throughout the capital region. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
All right, Kim, I'm going to start with you. The Greater Hartford Mobility Study was known as a planning and environmental linkage study. Can you let our listeners know, unpack that just a little bit, let them know what a PEL study is and why the department went this route and what it accomplished?
Thanks, Ben. So a PEL is literally just what its namesake is. It is a link between the planning and the environmental phases of a major program or project. So the environmental phase of a project, normally we would head right into NEPA, otherwise known as the National Environmental Policy Act, and we would jump right into that portion of a program or project. What a PEL does is it's a process that allows us, before we head into NEPA, to explore what we would call a universe of alternatives, right? What could we possibly do out there, and to narrow that down to a reasonable range. It allows for early outreach. It allows for us to hear from the public and stakeholders. It allows us to do things like create a draft purpose and need or a vision for the region or for the program. And it allows us to do some early identification of critical resources and issues that may arise so that we can go into that NEPA phase a lot more efficiently. Very importantly, it also allows us to identify what we call early action items that can move forward independently. And I think you'll hear from Kevin later on how many very important projects were identified with this PEL.
Yes, and we will certainly get to what those early actions are in just a moment. Kim, just how important was or is public involvement in a major transportation study such as this?
It really is the cornerstone of everything that we do in major studies or within NEPA. While we have expertise in many areas here at the department, we need to hear directly from the people that live and work in and commute through these communities. It's important to hear their needs firsthand, where they're experiencing gaps in our systems, and what's important to them. They also often have information that we just would not have on the local level as far as resources that are within a community. Or things that they envision that could be, mitigation approaches that we could implement as these programs move forward.
So, Kevin, this whole thing was not done in a vacuum within the DOT or outside the DOT. Can you tell us how community leaders, partners, and the public were involved in the process that you led?
Thanks, Ben. Let me put some of this in context with how this process started, where the department had some earlier projects that were not as successful with their public involvement. And we kind of lost the public trust. They didn't really feel that we were listening to their needs as how the highways affected their communities, and they really challenged us as we look to replace the I-84 elevated viaduct to put as much emphasis on the highway's effects on its neighbors as much as solving its traffic problems. And the department successfully rose to that challenge with a public involvement program that was comprehensive and innovative. This included starting with some open planning studios, which the first one was actually a week-long one where the public could come in at any time and share their ideas. We created a public advisory committee with various subcommittees on different topics to get their input and concerns and feedback on various potential solutions. The team connected with stakeholders wherever possible, including at community events, festivals, farmers markets, schools, churches, and even in people's homes. During COVID, in-person engagement was impossible, so an online portal was developed to continue involvement virtually. Post-COVID, to increase participation in areas that were still underrepresented in our metrics, we worked with a local group, the Voices of Women of Color, to dig deeper into our grassroots efforts. We used many tools to ensure that our message reached the broadest audience possible, including traditional print and broadcast media, social media, and a lot of in-person canvassing. The effectiveness of that approach has now really been recognized by its positive public feedback and is now being duplicated as the new standard for the department moving forward.
So, Kim, you and I could probably talk for an hour or longer talking about recommendations from the study. But high level, what are we looking at here? What are the major recommendations of the study?
Yeah, we certainly could talk for quite a while about it, Ben. This Pell study, like I said, narrowed down some recommendations, but after getting all the way through it, the implementation plan has actually identified 66 recommendations. So even if we did less than a minute for each one, it'd definitely be over an hour. So we have, some core components, some early actions, midterm actions, and long-term actions. I just want to make a note that some of the exciting things about all of these components is that they consist of, not only fixes for the highway, but improvements with bike and ped, ways to get around the city and around the region, as well as improvements to transit and rail. But the four core components have some names. One of them is CityLink East, and that is really planned as the first step. It is a new connection from Route 2 to I-91 northbound, and new ramp connections in East Hartford for 84 westbound to Route 2 westbound and Route 2 eastbound to I-84 eastbound. So this is really looking at mitigating some congestion in downtown Hartford by relocating the I-84 and the I-91 interchange, and then having that new bridge to connect Route 2 and East Hartford. So that's an exciting first step. Another major component is known as CityLink West, and that would reconstruct I-84 as a lower at or below grade freeway between Park Street and the new interchange. And then we also have plans for what we're calling the River Gateway, which connects Hartford's Central Business District and the Sheldon Charter Oak neighborhood with the Connecticut River, and also could include anticipated development along East Hartford's waterfront. It includes connections across I-91 by lowering the segment in the area of Dillon Stadium and capping it to accommodate an urban boulevard. So this is really about reconnecting the city to the river, and really making that resource accessible to the people of Hartford. And then the last major one is Founders Gateway. That would consolidate the I-84 and Route 2 interchange ramps in East Hartford and reconfigure the Founders Bridge to be more of a local complete street boulevard type of experience.
So, Kevin, there's a lot going on there. What can listeners look forward to both in the now term and maybe the medium term?
Yeah, as Kim alluded to, there's over 60 short and midterm recommendations. And while these are smaller in scale than some of those four major components that we spoke of, the resulting improvements are no less important to those they affect. Examples of these improvements where work is already underway by the department include intersection work at Albany and Main and Pulaski Circle, both in Hartford, and corridor improvements along Main Street in East Hartford. These projects are going to look to implement a complete streets approach that the department is now encouraging, and that will provide better access and safety for pedestrians and bicyclists while still improving those traffic operations for motorists. Other recommendations include expanding the bike network on local streets and greenways, including completing the gaps in the East Coast Greenway through Hartford and East Hartford. And although these bike networks are often considered just recreational, they're very important in this area as a vital mobility component, as Hartford has some of the highest percentage of households with no access to motor vehicles. So these bike routes are critical for them to get to work and school. One of the midterms that Kim sort of mentioned there was the getting started with the Northern River crossing. And while this will help with the longer term plan of relocating I-84 and the interchange, the bridge alone addresses an independent purpose of better connecting Route 2 with 91, and that would remove better than 20% of the traffic from the Bulkley Bridge and that northern section of 91. Those ramps also have very poor geometry, and the traffic on them is very slow and contributes to congestion at the interchange and along both interstates. The bridge approach also is on a new alignment, which would allow it to be built faster and with less impact on the existing traffic and the community.
Kim, back to you. How important are the projects and improvements identified in the plan? How critical are they for the economic growth of the Hartford as well as the region?
As you mentioned at the outset, Ben, right, it's not just about moving people, but about moving goods. This is a very important freight corridor for the entire nation. I think everyone that's listening knows that Connecticut sits in between Boston and New York. So we're an important connection for a lot of folks that are trying to get places, but also for the movement of goods. Also, when you think about some of the things that are more, I'll say, down on the ground, at that more local level, we have this vision to help our citizens get to work, to get to school, to get to work, maybe just to get out, to recreate, to go out to dinner in the downtown area or some of the surrounding towns. And hopefully that's going to be in a safer or more efficient manner. But also maybe they're going to have some different modal choices that they can pick from when this vision becomes a reality, right? That's our ultimate goal. So when it's a little bit easier to do those things, or you have more choices, we're hoping that that's going to bring in more business. And we also have the possibility of removing some infrastructure and having some room for development, especially on the East Hartford side, as this whole vision comes together.
So, Kevin, back to you. Last month, the episode was around transportation and its role in creating more equitable communities. And it was really a national theme, but we talked a lot about the state of Connecticut, of course. And I know one of the goals of this study was to undo the damage to neighborhoods in Hartford when the interstate highway system was constructed several decades ago. Can you talk more about the positive impacts on neighborhood connectivity as a result of the projects which were identified within the Greater Hartford study?
Sure. From the outset of this study, it included a goal to better reconnect the community. Going back into the 19th century, the railroad did divide Hartford, but when the interstates came in the 1970s, that construction had a big negative impact on the city, with the construction in downtown destroying and dividing neighborhoods. Long stretches of the highway now tower over a sea of parking lots and underutilized land uses. And as we, in this program look to untangle the highway and rail. It's going to allow us to lower that highway below grade of the local streets and allow them to pass over the highway so that uh, there will be more human scale connections between neighborhoods, and these connections will be able to be further supported by street level development, accessible by all modes of transportation. Further looking to the efforts on I-91, we hope to have this better access to the riverfront on both the Hartford and East Hartford sides.
So, Kevin, Kim mentioned just a moment ago about different modes. I may be biased, but I'd like to talk about one of them in particular. Can you talk a little bit about what improvements to public transportation were identified in the report, and how will they improve transportation equity?
Absolutely. So detangling what we just spoke of, detangling the rail from moving it north and west of the highway, removes several curves in the rail track, which, along with double tracking it along that in that corridor, will provide increased and faster service along the Hartford line. Realigning I-84 to the north over a new river crossing frees the Bulkley Bridge for local uses, including uh, providing a path to expand the Connecticut Fast Track bus service to the east of the river. These services have both been very successful, and these improvements will make them even that much more effective. And many other recommendations we have in the report that address how transit can be more competitive with automobile travel for those who have the choice, and also more effective for those who don't. This involves having better access to routes that better serve the community at times and frequencies that address user needs. And while some of these recommendations will be directly addressed out of the report, we'll be looking to have a more comprehensive service analysis to follow this study and undertaken to address others.
That's fantastic. Okay, before we go, I'm very curious as to how both of you see these changes and how they will positively impact the residents and employers within Hartford. So, Kim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, lots of exciting things about this study and what's to come and the projects to come from it. I think I'm the most excited about the opportunity to really knit some of these neighborhoods back together, to have some increased access to the riverfront, and to create some green space in Hartford. So that's what I'm envisioning, and hope I get to be at some of the ribbon cuttings.
Kevin, what do you think?
Yes, I agree. Through all our conversations with the community, we really are looking for this uh, highway network, while that very necessary as a conduit for moving people and goods to keep the lifeblood of the capital economy going, that this highway network will also be a good neighbor to those who are in the city, and hopefully the construction will improve their quality of life.
And Kim, I almost forgot. Where can the listeners go to learn more about the Greater Hartford Mobility Study and the future of Hartford?
That's an easy one, Ben. HartfordMobility.com.
Awesome. Thank you both for coming. Kim Lesay, Kevin Burnham, both from the Connecticut DOT. Thanks for joining me today for this engaging and insightful conversation.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
The Greater Hartford Mobility Study is vital to improve the region's mobility by planning an integrated and resilient multimodal transportation system in the Greater Hartford region, enhancing the quality of life and economy of the region, and reconnecting neighborhoods that were severed by the interstate highway system. As a result of the study, an implementation plan will be developed that includes short-term and long-term solutions in Hartford as well as its suburbs. Of course, community involvement will continue throughout the coming years to assess the improvements and impacts of each project, since these projects will transform the capital region for generations to come. We are excited to see the transformation of our transportation network in the capital region. I'm Ben Limmer. Join us next time for another episode of Along the Lines.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Along the Lines. This is your host, Benjamin Limmer. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe and share.